Okay, Tov. We're on Daf Kuf Chaf. And we started Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. Let's go back to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. You'll see on the left side on Kuf Chaf Amid Aleph, Tosas Dibra Maskel Maftirin. And if you go up above that about 3 lines, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Amar Echad Zeh, the Echad Zeh Dirabanan. So that means that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov disagrees with Rava. Rava said that although Morar Bismana says the Rabbana because we don't have the Korban Pesach, but Matzah Bismana says a separate independent mitzvah derived from the pasuk Ba'erev Tochlu Matzahs, and therefore Matzah Bismana says Doraisa. Comes along Rav Acha Bar Yaakov and he says no. Just like Morar Bismana is the Rabbanon, so too Matzah Bismana says the Rabbanon. In both cases, Matzah and Morar, the mitzvah is contingent on the achilas haPesach, as the Torah says, al matzah umrom yachlu. Today we don't have the Korban Pesach. We don't have a mitzvah to eat neither matzah nor morar. So the Gemara asks, Elo haksiv, but Rava based his argument on the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzahs, and that pasuk is not in the context of Korban Pesach. It's a separate independent mitzvah of matzah. So the Gemara answers to defend Rav Acha, that pasuk is not coming to teach me the mitzvah of achilas matzah, which would apply even bisman as an independent mitzvah, because matzah is always dependent upon Pesach. But miboile, I need that pasuk to teach me that when the Mikdash stood, le tameh u le mishayir derech rechoka, for those 2 categories of people who cannot bring the Korban Pesach, and they're pushed off to Pesach Sheni on the 14th of Iyar, I need a pasuk to tell me that they're obligated in matzah. Salkadak, I would have thought, Keva the Pesach lo achli, since they're not eating Pesach in its time, in its proper time, on the 14th of Nisan. Therefore, matzu mar nami lo lecha, they are pturim from matzu mar. The Torah did not command a mitzvah of matzah mar independent of the Korban Pesach. They can't bring the Korban Pesach, and therefore I might have concluded that they're not chayiv in matzah mar. Kamash Malan, the pasuk tells me, ba'erev tochlu matzahs, that even a tameh v'haya b'derech rechoka, even though he's not capable of eating the Korban Pesach, nevertheless he's obligated to eat the matzah and the maror. But that's only bisman hamikdash. When there is maror and there is matzah together with the Korban Pesach, and even if in an event he cannot bring the Korban Pesach, he's chayav to eat matzah and maror. And from the fact that he's chayav to eat matzah and maror, we're not going to derive the conclusion that even bisman hazeh, when we have no Korban Pesach, he's chayav to eat matzah and maror. The Torah says that as long as there's a Korban Pesach, even those who are not capable of eating the Korban Pesach are included in the chiyuv, the mitzvah of matzah and maror. But bisman hazeh, there's no Korban Pesach at all, and therefore there's no mitzvah of matzah u'maror. So again, just to reiterate the shita of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, he's saying the following, that you need a zman haroy leKorban Pesach if there is a latent obligation to Korban Pesach, then there's an obligation of matzah maror. Matzah maror as a chiyuv would not emerge independent of that time period that's roy leKorban Pesach. We don't need that he's actually eating the Korban Pesach. He may, in fact, have to delay his Korban Pesach for another month because he's Tomei B'derech Rechoka, but nevertheless, he has the mitzvah matzah maror as derived from the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzahs. But that's only because there is a Korban Pesach. There's a chiyuv Korban Pesach which he cannot fulfill, and together with that chiyuv Korban Pesach comes achilas matzah and achilas maror. And the chiddush of ba'erev tochlu matzahs is that since the chiyuv of Korban Pesach engendered a chiyuv of matzah maror, then that chiyuv of matzah maror continues. Even if Lamaisa befall, he cannot implement and fulfill his mitzvah of Korban Pesach. But that's only because the chiyuv of matzah maror was generated by the chiyuv of Korban Pesach. The bitzua, the kiyum of Korban Pesach, might have to be delayed because of Hoya Tomei v'Hoya B'derech Choka. But the Chiyuv of Korban Pesach, or the day that generates the Chiyuv of Korban Pesach, is there even for him. And although he cannot fulfill his mitzvah of Korban Pesach, he has a separate mitzvah of Achilas Matzah and Maror that was generated by the Korban Pesach. But today, Bisman, I said we don't have a Korban Pesach, so there's no mitzvah that could generate a Chiyuv of Matzah Maror, and therefore Matzah Maror, Bisman says D'Rabbanan. For Rava, how does Rava reject, or why does Rava reject the logic of Rav Acha bar Yaakov? It's impossible to justify the pasuk b'erev tochlu matzos as referring to those who are incapable of bringing the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. To lo gari mi orel uben nechar. In the case of an orel, he cannot do his milah because, let's say, there's hemophilia in the family, mesiu achiv machmas hamila. Or a ben nechar is a mumar, a Jew who was born a Jew, but he's a mumar. In these two cases, they don't need to Korban Pesach, and yet they're obligated the mitzvah of matzah. Again, we have to see how we know that. But that being the case, then in the cases of Tamei v'derech choka, they're no better or worse than other people who cannot bring the Korban Pesach, like an orel or a ben nechar, a mumar. And yet those are chayav in achilas matzah. The sadi we learned in a brisa. The Torah says v'chol orel lo yochal bo. Now, what do we see in this extra word bo? The Torah didn't have to add the word bo. Bo is a mute, and it's telling me lo yochal bo. He cannot eat the korban pesach. An orel eino ochel. Aval ochel, but the mute is that he does eat matzu mar, and he's obligated to do so, like every other Jew. Now, we're not going to say that since he doesn't have the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, he's an orel, therefore he doesn't have the mitzvah of Matzu Mar. No. We have a pasuk that says, Kol orel lo yochal bo, and Kol benecha lo yochal bo, and bo is telling me that he doesn't eat in the Korban Pesach because he's an orel or a benecha, but he does eat the matzah. And in that sense, he's mitzvah kekol Yisrael. He has the same identical obligation as every other Jew. So he's excluded from the Korban Pesach. Bo, eino ochal, ochal u'b'matzu mar. So the Tomei and the Derech Choka, they also do not eat the Korban Pesach, but yet they're going to be obligated to eat matzah nevertheless. So the pasuk b'erev tochlu matzos, therefore, is coming to teach me, according to Rava, that there is an independent mitzvah of achilas matzah that applies bisman hazeh even in the absence of a korban pesach. And that's derived from the pasuk b'erev tochlu matzos in Rava l'shitasa. But that's because Rava says I don't need a pasuk for Orel. I'm sorry, for Tamei v'Hoya b'derech chok. I derive that from Orel ben Nechar, that they are obligated in the mitzvah of matzah. So why did the Torah need? What justifies the extra pasuk b'erev tochlu matzos? It's to teach us that matzah, even without the Pesach, is an independent chiyuv, and it's a chiyuv d'oraisa. The idach. Now let's go back. The ball goes back to the court of Rav Acha bar Yaakov. What is he going to do with the argument of Rav that we don't need a pasuk for Tamei v'Hoya b'derech choka? He's obligated to matzah. We already derived that from Orel and Ben Nechar. And Rav Acha bar Yaakov answers, Ksiv b'hai uksiv b'hai. The Torah establishes the chiyuv of achilas matzah, number one, in the case of Orel for Ben Nechar, and number two, in the case of Tamei v'Hoya b'derech choka tzrichi. And I need both of them. So that we don't have a pasuk that's superfluous and is going to establish a chiyuv of achilas matzah even bisman hazeh. That we don't have. Now, what's the utzrichi here? So for this, we have to see footnote number Yutes here in the Masechet. He says, Ilu nichtav chak orel u ben nechar, hayisi lomed bahem Lo yisi lo mebahem l'tomei derech hachalka. Why? What's the difference between oral ben nechar? They have a chiyuv of matzah, and tomei and derech hachalka perhaps would be exempted from matzah. Mipnei shetomei v'derech hachalka asidim lechol pesach sheni al matzos umerorim l'chein vayisi omer shebepesach rishon lo yochlu matzu mor. Let's delay their obligation of matzu mor until Pesach Sheni when they eat the korban Pesach, because matzah mor and Pesach are 3 parts of one mitzvah. So therefore, in Orel and Ben Nechar, the Torah says that they have to eat Pesach, they have to eat matzah and murr on the 14th of Nisan. Now, obviously, in the cases of Tomei and Hoya B'derech HaChoka, there's a Havamina that they don't eat matzah and Pesach Rishon. They're going to eat the matzah with Pesach Sheni. However, in the cases of Orel and Ben Nechar, they're not considered asidim lechol b'Pesach Sheni. They are excluded from Pesach, whether it's Pesach Rishon or Pesach Sheni. And I cannot derive from Orel ben Nechar that a Tomei and Hoya B'derech Choka are obligated in the midst of matzah, because Orel ben Nechar are obligated in the midst of matzah by virtue of Beratochu matzahs, because they don't have the korban Pesach. They will not be eating matzah and maror on Pesach Sheni. They're completely excluded from Pesach, both Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. And that would be the reason why the Torah had to obligate them in the mitzvah of matzah maror. And if I only had the pasuk by Erev Tochlu Matzahs, I would only derive the conclusion that Orel ben Nechar, who have no possibility of ever eating the matzah maror, they're chayav in matzah maror. And when I say there's no possibility, because they don't have Pesach Sheni a month down the line. But Tomei B'derech HaChoka that are asidim, they will eat the korban Pesach a month down the line at Pesach Sheni, and they'll eat it with matzah maror. Then Barishon, on Yudal B'Nisan, they will not eat the matzah. And that's why I need 2 psukim. I need a pasuk to teach me that even Tomei B'derech HaChoka, who are asidim lechol asam matzah v'asam ima Pesach, nevertheless, they will eat matzah b'Pesach Rishon. So Rabbosai, we now understand the argument and the logic of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. He does not have an extra pasuk from which to establish and derive a chiyuv of matzah b'zman hazeh. There ain't no such pasuk. And why is that? Because I need the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzos to teach me that even Tamei v'haya derech hachoka, who will eat the matzah of Pesach Sheni, they're still obligated in Pesach Rishon. But there's no source from which to derive that matzah bisman hazeh is dorais. So we have two psukim. We've got the pasuk bo, kol orel lo yochel bo, and kol ben necha lo yochel bo. And the word bo is going to teach me a chiyuv matzah on orel and ben nechar. But I still need a pasuk b'erev tochlu matzahs for the cases of tamei v'haya b'derech rechoka, because I might think that they're not in the same boat as orel and ben nechar, because they have the mitzvah of matzah in Pesach Sheni, together with the korban. So the bottom line is that according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, we have no source whatsoever for matzah bisman hazeh dorais. So let's wonder about the following question. According to what we're learning now, a tamei and a haya b'derech rechoka will actually fulfill the mitzvah of matzah twice. Once on the 14th of Nisan and once on the 14th of Iyar. So you might ask me, we have one brach on matzah. Two times I got to eat matzah? The answer is posh. One time the matzah on Yudal Ben Nisan is an independent mitzvah that stands on its own 2 feet, even without the Achilas HaPesach. And then a month down the line at Pesach Sheni, the matzah is going to be eaten as an accompaniment to the Korban Pesach. If you would ask me, what was to be the bracha on matzah for Tamei v'haya b'derech rechoka, I'll tell you the following. L'fi ani istaiti. On Pesach Rishon, they will make a bracha asher kidshonim v'tzos al achilas matzah. On Pesach Sheni, they'll make an entirely different bracha. And the matzah, the morah that he eats with the Pesach are coming to accompany the Pesach. And they come not as an independent mitzvah achila, but as part and parcel of the mitzvah achilas Pesach. Al matzah sumrom yochlu. So, sometimes, you learn these sugis with drushes and this drush and this ribu, and what does he say? What does he say? Back and forth, like a ping pong. And, we tend to think, all right, it's very technical and we got to go through it. It's part of the daf, but it doesn't really have too much of a repercussion. But the truth is, it always, always has repercussions. And this is just one outstanding example. Because once we juggle all these psukim and all the svaras and what we need in the pasuk to teach me, we come to the final conclusion that matzah bisman hazeh is either doraisa or derabban, depending upon how you set up the alfusas. Tanya Kavase de Rova. Now, this brisa is going to darshan a pasuk in Parshas Re'ei Dvarim Tesayin, Sheishes Yomim Tochal Matzos, Ubiyom HaShvi Atzeres LaShem Elokecha, Osasem Olo. Now, if you read this pasuk carefully, it's very strange. How many days are you obligated to eat matzah? 6. Does that mean that on the 7th day of Pesach, there's no mitzvah of matzah? It doesn't say tochal matzos with regard to the 7th day. It only says it with regard to the first 6 days. And therefore, we come to the conclusion at this point that matzah on the 7th day is a rishus. It's not a chova. It's not a mitzvah. So that would mean that on the 7th day of Pesach, let him eat basar, let him eat pas, let him not eat at all. Let him fast. There's no mitzvah of eating matzah. But then we have to take it one step further. Mashvi rishus, af sheshes yomim rishus. To the same extent that shvi is only a rishus. If he wants to eat matzah, fine. If he doesn't want to eat matzah, that's also acceptable. So too, by equation, all the other 6 days of Pesach, matzah is a rishus. Again, we'll see the exception on the first night of Pesach because of the pasuk be'erev tochlu matzahs. My timer. What justifies this leap of faith that because the mitzvah of matzah on the 7th day is only rishus, therefore the other 6 days, matzah is only rishus? My timer. Heavy dover shayu bechlal v'yotz min haklal alamid lo alamid al atzvi yotze alamid al kalkulu yotze. So we go back to the Gimel Mido Shator Nidreshes by him. And we have a dover shahayu bechlal. When the Torah says in Parshas Bo Shivas Yomim Tochal Matzos, it includes the 7th day as well. It's included in the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah like the first 6 days. V'yotzim in a klal. And now we're taking Yom HaShvi out of the klal because it says in the pasuk by Yom HaShvi Atzeres L'Hashem Elokecha. But as far as the mitzvah of matzah, it only says Sheishes Yom. So we're in a very strange situation because the original pasuk says Shivas Yomim Tochal Matzos, and therefore the 7th day of Pesach is Bechlal. It's included under the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, but then the Torah says Sheishes Yomim Tochal Matzos, implying that there's no mitzvah of matzah on the 7th day. But keep in mind, we have the pasuk Shivas Yomim Tochal Matzos, which includes Yom HaShvi. And the answer is Lo Lamed Al Atzmo Yotza, Lamed Al Kalkuli Yotza. Therefore, we darshan that on all 7 days, Achilas Matzah is not a chova, but rather a shus. Okay, but what about the first night? Yachol, I might think, Af Laila Rishon, even the first night, is not an obligation. Imagine, I have no obligation to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. Who would even entertain such an idea? But if we apply the principle of Haya B'chlal, V'yotzim Neklal, Lo Al Atzmo Yotza, Al Kalkula Yotza, then there should be no chiyuv of achilas matzah on the first night. Talmud Lomar. But the pasuk says, "Al matzos u'merorim yochlu." Eat the matzah and the maror together with the korban pesach, which is eaten on the first night. So now what conclusion are we coming to? That the mitzvah of matzah as a chova is generated by the achilas ha-pesach. Al matzah sumrom yochlu. And at this point, the Brisa seems to be totally oblivious to the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzahs. And therefore the Brisa says, Ein li ela bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. If the mitzvah of matzah as a chova is generated by Korban Pesach, then bisman ezelu we don't have a Korban Pesach, we have no mitzvah of matzah. Talmud lomar ba'erev tochlu matzahs. Now we have Rava. Hakosiv kvo chova. Even bisman ezelu we don't have the Korban Pesach. We still have an independent mitzvah of matzah. So we have now a brisa that explicitly supports Rava. And the pasuk Al Matzu Mrom Yochlu tells me that on the first night of Pesach, we have a chova to eat matzah together with the Pesach. And the mitzvah of matzah is generated by the Pesach. And if we stop here, because we're oblivious to another pasuk of Erev Tochlu Matzahs, then obviously Bisman Hazeh, there won't be a mitzvah of matzah. But the Brisa continues by saying that there is an extra pasuk that cuts the umbilical cord between matzah and Pesach and sets up matzah as an independent mitzvah. What pasuk is that? But Erev Tochlu Matzahs. Then the Brisa says, if Ba'erev Tochlu Matzah sets up an independent mitzvah of matzah that's not contingent or connected or generated by Pesach, then even Bisman Hazeh, we have a mitzvah of eating matzah. And you therefore get the impression that this sugya ends by supporting the sheet of Rav. And therefore, the mitzvah of matzah bisman hazeh is dorais. So again, just to review that one last time, when the Mikdash stood, we had two independent kiyumim of achilas matzah. One together with the Pesach, and another even without the Pesach, as a separate mitzvah of achilas matzah. And the mitzvah of matzah with the Pesach is derived from one pasuk, but al matzah mrom yochlu, and the mitzvah of matzah without the Korban Pesach is derived from a different pasuk for erev tochlu matzahs. Hence, Rava concludes that matzah bisman hazeh is doraisa, not under the pasuk, obviously, of al matzah mrom yochlu, we don't have the Korban Pesach, but rather under the pasuk for erev tochlu matzahs. Is it clear? And what does Rav Acha Bar Yaakov argue? He says we need the two psukim. And both psukim are talking about Bisman HaMikdash. And even though Orel and Ben Nechar are obligated in matzah, I would have still thought that maybe Tamei Vayim Derech Rechoka is not chayav in matzah because he can avail himself and fulfill his mitzvah of matzah a month down the line in Pesach Sheni. And that's why I need a pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzahs. But all this applies only bisman hamikdash, and therefore, says Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, today, matzah is only d'Rabbanan. we draw the conclusion that according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, even the mitzvah of Haggadah, of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, in our time is only D'Rabbanan. Because Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is Bavur Zeh, B'shoshesh Matzu Mora Munachim Lefanecha, which only applies when the Mikdash is there. For example, there's a whole deal whether or not you can fulfill your mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim if you hear the Haggadah from a sumo. Why? Because how can a summa be motzi me in Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim and Haggadah when he's not chayav d'oraisa, because there's no bavur zeh for a summa, and yet the Rabbanan said he's chayav in all mitzvahs. So he's chayav in reading the Haggadah midrabanan. Can he be motzi me? Well, it depends. If I hold like Rava, I'm obligated to oraisa. We got a real serious problem. If, on the other hand, I accept Rav Acha bar Yaakov, then the entire entity of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, even for a pikeach, is the Rabbanan. So therefore, one could argue that a sumo who's chayiv the Rabbanan could be motzi even a pikeach who's chayiv the Rabbanan. That's according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Because if matzah bisman says the Rabbanan, then Haggadah bisman is Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is also the Rabbanan. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Cha. And this Mishnah will take us into the halachas of Korban Pesach. Now, don't be surprised that, we have Mishnayos dealing with Korban Pesach. Half of Masechet Pesachim is dedicated to the laws of Korban Pesach. Now, in mentioning Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, we should raise the question whether a woman is obligated in that mitzvah insofar as it's a Zman Groma mitzvah. But one thing is clear, that she's obligated b'Rabbanan. Could a woman read the Haggadah and a man listen to the Haggadah? I would say, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, yes. Because if matzah bismana says D'Rabbanan, then Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim bismana says D'Rabbanan, and a woman has the identical chiyuv D'Rabbanan as a man. However, the following two premises cannot coincide, cannot be reconciled. Number one, that matzah bismana says D'Oraisa. Number two, that a woman is not obligated midoraisa but midrabanan, and yet she could be motzi a man with Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. That cannot be reconciled, because if she's only obligated to Rabbanan and he's obligated to Oraisa, because we pass like Rava, the matzah bismana says to Oraisa, then Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is to Oraisa. Her obligation is only to Rabbanan. She's not obligated On a doraisa level, she cannot be motzi. However, all this is based on one premise, and that is that Haggadah requires peh. Haggadah b'peh. Like Eidos is Haggadah, Sipitzis Mitzrayim is Haggadah. It's not enough for machshava. If it would be enough for machshava, then when I hear the reading of an Isha and I have the machshava, that should be sufficient. And the whole diyun, whether or not a woman could be motzi a man in Sipit Yisrael, would be totally irrelevant because we're talking about machshava. Her reading of the Haggadah only has to get me that mental, emotional state of Yitzias Mitzrayim. But if there's a separate mitzvah of Haggadah b'peh, v'gadata b'peh, then she cannot be motzi me if I assume A, that I'm obligated to rice, and B, she's only obligated to Rabbah. Now, what we said according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that Sibitzis Chaim Bisman says to Rabbanan, therefore a suma or an isha, if she's only obligated to Rabbanan, could be motzi a man, a pikeach. That depends upon a different issue, which is called trade Rabbanan. Are you familiar with that? So you have one person who has a double Rabbanan. What does that mean? The summa is only obligated to Rabbanan as a summa, and the mitzvah itself, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, is only to Rabbanan. So he has trade Rabbanan. If he wants the motzi a pikeach in Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim, the Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim of pikeach is chad Rabbanan, not trade Rabbanan. So that's a sugya unto itself. Yoshnu miktsasom yochelu, kulon lo yochelu. Right, we have a din in Korban Pesach called a chabura. And in the middle of the eating of the Korban Pesach, in this particular chabura, some of the members of the chabura fell asleep. Those who are awake would like to continue and eat the Korban Pesach. It's enough that there's someone else in the chabura who's going to join me in that achila to make it a kiyum of achila b'chabura. However, kulam, if they're all asleep, then there's no way that you can continue and eat the Korban Pesach, because then you're not part of a chabura, you're like the Lone Ranger. However, there seems to be another issue here entirely, which is the subject of this long footnote number Chaf Hey, and that is the Isur of Achilas HaPesach b'Shnei Makomos. Now, what's the connection between Yashen and Shinui Makom? And the answer is that Shnei Makomos is the same as going from one chabura to another chabura. Now, if your entire chabura went to sleep and you're the only one awake, then for all intents and purposes, your chabura doesn't exist anymore. And then you'd be eating the Korban Pesach without a chabura, which is called Shnei Makomos. What's kovea chabura are two conditions. Number one, it's got to be also makom. You started in a certain makom, and that's where you're going to complete your achila b'chabura. Number two, the entire chabura is with you, participating in the achila, or at least part of the chabura participating in the achila, which is called yashnu miktsasam. But if yashnu kulam, the whole chabura is now disintegrated. And it's like eating in two makomos. So this footnote number 25, Chaf Hey, requires a lot of study. I, for one, I'm not prepared for that challenge. But I would like Be'ezer Hashem to at least complete the Mishnah on a simple level. So let's turn to Kuf Chaf Amid Beis. Rabbi Yossi Omer, he is the dissenting view and the Bar Plukta of the Tanakam. Tanakam established that if Yashnu Kulam, you can't eat the Korban Pesach. Says Rabbi Yossi, Nisnamnu Yochelu. Chachamim, you went too far. You made a general, all-inclusive statement of Yashnu. Well, Yashnu could include two different things. It could include what's called Be Hardama, Nirdamu. Nirdamu means you're in a deep sleep. And the word sleep of Yashnu could include even Nisnamnu. Like, for example, in Tefillin. If he was Nisnamnem, he's allowed to wear his Tefillin. He's taking a light snooze. But if it was a case of Nirdamu means you're in a deep sleep, then you're not part of the Chabur at all. So Nisnamnu, says Rabbi Yossi Yochelu, they can continue eating the Korban Pesach. It's almost like a chiluk between the Gavra and the Maisa Gavra. What do I mean? In Nisnamnu, quite obviously, he's not capable of eating the Korban Pesach, as far as the Maisa Achil is concerned. But he's not totally excluded until he reaches the state of Nirdamu. Nirdamu is already Afkas HaGavra. It's almost like a change in the status of a person. And Nirdamu, by virtue of the change in the status of a person, he's no longer one of the members of the Chabura, and therefore lo yochelu. They cannot continue to eat the Korban Pesach. Because the Chabura is disintegrated. That's called Nirdamu. But now I have to ask a different question. What happens if they wake up, or when they wake up, and it's still Lizman of Achilas HaPesach? And the answer is, and this is going to be a Rashbam that we'll study, Bli Neder, that once the Chabura fell apart, it cannot be recreated. It's Paka Shem Chabura. So the original Minui, when they all joined up in a partnership effort, sets up a Shem Chabura. And once that Shem Chabura is Paka through Nirdamu, then the original Chabura, which is established by the Minui, cannot be regenerated Yesh Me'ayin. It cannot be resuscitated. It's gone. And the last part of this Mishnah, which really requires a lot of work, is Taros. And the Mishnah establishes that a Korban Pesach on the first night of Pesach, which is Tesvav ben Nisan, has to be eaten until Chatzos, and not after Chatzos, reflecting the Shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So what's the status of the Korban Pesach, of the Basar Korban, after Chatzos? It's not Royal Achila. Is Mitame Yadayim after Chatzos, if your hands come in contact with the Basar of Pesach, that's Mitame Yadayim. And this Xeras Chachamim called Tumas Yadayim, and the rest of the goof is tahar, just the Yadayim Atmeos. And Apigul Hanosar Mitame Yadayim. Once the Rabbana made Xera on Pigul and Nosar, then any contact with Pigul or Nosar, which is Pigul is a korban that was nifsal because the Kohen had a machsheves Pigul of Chutz Zman of Chutz Komo. Nosar is after Zman Achila, so Mitamin Yadayim. And the same din is going to apply to Basar Pesach after Chatzos. It's like Nosar. And Nosar, after Zman Achilaso, is Mitami Yadayim. So too, the Korban Pesach, the Basar Pesach after Chatzos, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, is Mitami Yadayim. Okay then. So let's just figure out what the schedule is. Tomorrow is Thursday. So I give a Daf Yomi Shir at 9:45. And I should be finished by approximately 10:45. Let's just figure this out. And so what do we want to learn tomorrow? Do we want to learn Pesachim or Sanhedrin? How does it work? Because we probably won't be starting till about 11, quarter to 11, but 11. I suggest that we do Sanhedrin. But let's think about it. I'm inclined to postpone Pesachim a little bit because we're getting into real heavy issues about Nosar and about Tumas Yadayim and also about Chabura for Achilas HaPesach. I mean, I think we need a little bit more time to think about it. Now, Steve is scheduled to return on Wednesday and Jeff on Thursday. And John is not here on Tuesday. So I don't know what other doctor's appointments you have. That I don't know. But assuming you don't have any other doctor's appointments, we should be able to learn on Sunday, Monday, and then probably even Wednesday and Thursday. So tomorrow's Thursday. We'll do Sanhedrin Bli Neder at approximately 11:15 or a little bit after that. Okay, then? And now we have, let's say, about a 20-minute break, and then we'll do some Sanhedrin. Elu heina nichnokim. Okay, then? So I'm going to close it down.